everybody. This is Andy Brisley with Apps Associates again, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this session of Value Chain Minutes. In this session, we're going to continue the discussions around scenario planning. And what I'd like to concentrate on in this session is the basic question of why companies would go through the effort of performing scenario plannings. So we talked earlier sessions about the word volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or VUCA, and how this may help companies react to that unexpected changes and the volatility. But I would also like to talk about some of the different opportunities that scenario planning can provide. And with me today, I have Shane Helleston, one of our experts in the planning area. So Shane, if you could provide some thoughts around the different opportunities and values that companies can gain by utilizing scenario planning, that would be a good place to start this session at.
Sure. Thanks for having me again. So we did talk in previous sessions on running various types of simulations at a high level. So scenario planning adds value to organizations in that it's a virtual and it's risk-free way to play out different assumptions and really allow the enterprise to design, test, and review different configurations of your supply chain. So I think, the key words again are that it's virtual and risk-free. And what I mean by this is because you're doing these changes in an offline fashion, so you can run these changes, not worry about impacting your organization and making changes to your master data. So going through a scenario planning efforts basically allows companies to anticipate and remediate risk areas in the supply chain. So I refer to this as supply chain risk management, provide different options for leveraging resources and materials, reviewing and testing scenarios basically in a virtual environment so companies can avoid, let's call it reactive remediation and be prepared for this. And the value this brings is that it accelerates basically time to market solutions by potentially remediating any bottlenecks prior to them to product launches, providing a holistic view of the supply chain of all the interdependent processes that impact the costs, the lead times, and the delivery to your customers. But I think probably the largest and most underutilized aspect of scenario planning is its ability to prepare for these disruptions. So I call that, supply chain risk management. By simulating all these various scenarios, things like lead time changes through network design, supplier changes. So if you want to change to your sourcing due to a tariff change, for example, that's a pretty big one these days. But basically, preparing for unexpected resource disruptions, be it like whether it's a mechanical resource or, you have a labor by having, alternates to turn around quickly and basically being able to react and be prepared proactively. Preparing for natural disasters. So these are happening here and there. So, but having, alternate sourcing as an example, an alternate sourcing strategy ready to go that you've tested out and you understand what the impacts are. And again, tariffs, that's another hot topic. You may want to switch suppliers, but you may want to really look at changing strategic sourcing and adjusting your network. And of course, if you change your sourcing, potentially you have to think about how much inventory you might need to carry. You may need to buy more from certain suppliers and stock more, which means you need additional warehouse capacity, for example. But I think, as you said earlier, Andy, the thing we can guarantee in supply chain are disruptions. So we don't know when they're going to be, what they will be, or when they will happen. But if you have a good holistic list of things that you could start to test and evaluate, scenario planning really gives you the ability to understand these potential impacts and understand where you may have risks down the road. So scenario planning is basically one of the best risk mitigation strategies a company can put into place.
So in addition to the obvious immediate needs that will arise, how do companies define what items and resources should go through a scenario planning effort to prepare for the unknown disruptions? Look, we've both been doing this for a really long time, and it just isn't a realistic expectation that all resources and items can go through this type of effort. So if you could give us some guidance on that, what's some of the best practices you've seen?
Sure. So one thing that supply planning has, it has the ability to provide segmentation on items. And really, you can think of it as an ABC type of analysis using the 80-20 rule for items. That's a great place to start. So scenario planning, for your your high value items, you may want to include an item that, if you had a disruption that would cause a big financial impact on, for your A items, for example. So if there's, commodity type of items that you're not really interested in, you can exclude those from your analysis. But typically, high value, high cost items that would have large impact on your supply chain, you could segregate or segment those into segments and utilize those within your analysis. Items, lead time sensitivity, so longer lead time items, or things like customer supplied items, or difficult to get items. These are opportunities that you would want to include, and perhaps look into some embedded AI lead time analysis process to be run when you're working with these items, so to make sure that you're working with the most high value and accurate data type of items. Another thing, bottleneck and constrain resources. So if you're using constraint planning, you can already define alternate resources, materials, and routings that the planning engine will suggest based on the parameters that you've modeled within the framework. But something to look at within scenario planning would be, do we have the resources in place? Do we have the items in place? Do we not have alternates for these? Are these critical choke points for us that if these were to go down, if these resources were to go down, here would be the impact on our production plan? And that's a big thing, because obviously that impacts service, that impacts inventory, et cetera. Another thing, items with high demand variability. And, that's obviously has strategic importance, especially for your high runner items. These combinations would, allow you to see potential different stocking strategies if you're moving perhaps maybe more from a make to order type of, or a mixed type of make to stock strategy, changing the promotion plans of items that the company make, from a revenue impact perspective would be huge. And these are all things that you could look at, categorize, and report on within the analytics within the framework. Whether or not using scenario planning, you have a lot of strong analytics within the tools to be able to do that. But using the analytics in a scenario planning, what if type of framework allows you to put all these things together to get a real holistic view. So scenario planning, modeling, it's a journey. What I've seen is a lot of companies get frustrated. You have too many variables. So start small, allow yourself to grow, use segmentation, allow that ABC analysis type of framework in place for your items, and start to grow it as you move forward.
Thanks for that information, Shane. And so in future sessions, we'll be speaking about what the process could or would look like, the level of effort, who the users are, and some of the lessons we've learned as we've guided companies through the scenario planning journey. Thanks, everyone, for attending. And if you have any comments, please let us know. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks a lot, everybody.